Okay, so the second thing is automation through scripts, APIs, and open source tools. And some people don't like scripting. Some people don't like security team scripting. And some companies don't really like open source tools. But I can tell you, you can make a lot of progress in this area if you focus on this. There's a lot of good tools out there, and there's a lot of good APIs that you can script. We'll talk about all these a little bit more later. And then the last thing is tools that are specifically built for automation. And about a year or so ago, everybody started calling these SOAR tools, security orchestration and automation response. So there's quite a few of those tools, and I consider that to be like the third step. In fact, we kind of come up with this maturity model. It's kind of a crude maturity model, but use, build, buy. So you want to leverage what you have. Then you want to maybe use some scripting and open source tools to enhance that. And then maybe buy some automation and orchestration tools. And the reason I kind of put this into a maturity model is you really don't want to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the SOAR tools when there's stuff in your organization that can be configured and that you can use for $0. And then let's say maybe you don't have the budget, but you're going to try to budget for this in a year or two. Well, there's some scripting and some open source tools and some things that are within arm's reach that you can do with very little budget and with a minimal amount of approvals. So real quick, just wanted to go through the difference here between security automation and security orchestration. A lot of people use those terms interchangeably, and that's okay, but security automation is just simply automating a security task, where typically security orchestration means the integration of security processes and applications. Okay, so if this looks like something you want to do, you want to try to get started and do some automation, this is what I would recommend. First of all, you want to determine your maturity model, kind of determine where you are. Is there anything that you have in your environment that you can go and you could tweak and tune? You want to consider the time and resource constraints that you have. Do you have time to take this on? And then also you want to determine your budget. Do you have a budget? And then you want to start looking at things that are going on within your environment. And you want to see what is going to give you the most benefit to automate. So you want to look for manual repetitive tasks for one thing. Sometimes these are easy to spot, sometimes they're not. You want to consider the frequency of the tasks. If it's something that happens over and over again all day long, like for example something maybe that a SOC analyst would do, then you want to take a look at that and then take a look at the time that it takes to perform the tasks. So I kind of think about this sometimes like a DBA. You know, a DBA comes in and they're going to look at the queries to execute the most first, and then they're going to maybe go down the line and look at queries to execute a lot and take a long time. So it's kind of the same with looking at this stuff. You want to look at the things that are going to give you the most benefit in the end. A couple of other considerations that you want to think about as you get started here is the process. Is the process well defined and understood? And I know that most people either love or hate documentation. Most of the time, even if you do love it, you don't have time for it. You get pulled off to something else before it's complete. But if you're going to automate something and you're going to do it right, you really need to have that documented and understood, that process. You also want to look at the complexity of the process. How complex is it? That is going to make a big impact on how difficult it is to automate. And then you want to evaluate the time that it's going to take to automate. Okay, so we're going to get started and we're going to go through these different steps. Of course, I had to start with the SIM. There's so much tuning and so many things that you can do with the SIM that I really felt like that was probably the most bang for the buck there, if you will. And in a lot of cases, people that I've talked to, they've agreed that there is a lot of time savings in just maybe looking at some of your processes around some of your SIM alerts or your events and trying to bring some additional automation into those. And really, one of the things that you want to do is you want to minimize what the analyst has to research. And you do this by bringing more information into the event. Or if you can't do that, you want to bring that information as close to the analyst as you can. And So one of the things that you can do is, what happens when you get an event about an IP address where you're going to go, you're going to do DNS lookups, you're going to look at the URL reputation, the threat intel, etc. Well, if possible, pull that into the event. That way the analyst doesn't have to do that. They may have enough information within the event to go ahead and make a decision on that. And so if you can't do that, if you can get that closer to them, have a script that everybody runs, some scripts, collection of scripts, then you're going to lower the time to detection, and you're going to lower the amount of time that SOC analysts are spending on these events. Okay, and then the next thing is SIEM integrations. And this really goes a long way. This is basically the integration of your firewall, your endpoint, your vulnerability management, etc. So obviously ingestion is important, so you want to ingest all that stuff into your SIEM. That's obvious. But the next thing that you want to do is you want to start integrating with those products, meaning like your firewall. And this is a big one. Can you tell your firewall to block an IP? And actually that's the main thing that I want to go over here is, instead of a SOC analyst getting an event and looking at it and saying, yeah, I know this is bad, let me go block that IP. Well, the SIEM has all of that information pretty much. And so really what you should do is you should have it block the IP and then maybe just alert the analyst and tell them what's been done. And that way if they need to take any additional action, they can. That's going to lower the time to mitigation. And so if you guys track metrics, then these things can really lower those numbers for you. Now, the way that most SIEMs do this is through, I know Splunk calls it adaptive response. Some people call it active response. There's different ways. If your SIEM doesn't have a way to do this, you may have to manually do it. But through the use of the firewall APIs, this is something that's really common these days and it's fairly easy. And what most of them are doing is you're going to set up a rule in your firewall that says, I want to block anything coming from this tag or this dynamic group. And so the SIEM is basically just throwing an IP address into a group or tagging it, and then the tag is going to make it go into the group. That's the way that typically works. And so just to give you an example, so on the far left here, I've got this kind of set up like this. So if a source fires off X number of signatures, maybe it's 5 or 6 or whatever, enough for me to tell that it's not somebody conducting legitimate business, or if X number of signatures are fired against a couple of different hosts, they're scanning the environment, then you want the SIEM to fire off that alert, and what it's going to do typically is it's going to tag that IP as like a bad actor. And then your firewall rule at the bottom is basically like I was saying, it's going to be looking at tags or a group that has tags in it, and it's just going to block those events. All right. So vulnerability management. Does anybody here ingest vulnerability data and then actually reprioritize it? You don't just look at what the vendor says, but you actually look at the risk within your environment and you reprioritize like the patching or anything? Okay, good. There's a few people in here that do, and that shows a lot of maturity, especially not just in vulnerability management, but also in automation. So that's really like an ultimate goal for people. But vulnerability management also is a good place to do some other scripting or some other automation. So for example, if a new asset shows up, maybe it's a legitimate asset, but maybe you want to check it to make sure your endpoint protection is installed. You want to check it to see if it adheres to your standards, that sort of thing. And then also, if a rogue asset shows up, it's a good time to kick it off the network or do whatever you need to do with it. For endpoint protection, my main point here is don't have your SOC analyst going out and installing endpoint protection. That should be part of an image, part of configuration management, part of scripting, something. You don't want to put a SOC analyst or even an IT person out installing that kind of stuff. You definitely want that to be automated, and if somebody puts a machine in your domain, it should just happen. And then as far as server hardening, it's kind of the same thing. You really don't want somebody sitting in front of a server going through a checklist. I mean, that's better than no checklist. But really, you want that to be part of configuration management, part of the build scripts, etc. Okay, so now we're going to move on to step 2, and this is automation through tools, scripts, and APIs. And I just put a few of these that have been really helpful in here, and a few that I think that you guys will find useful. So we talked about the analyst and how we want to bring the information closer to them. So that's one of the things that you can do here. Especially I put this in here because a lot of people have asked about scripting. They're interested in learning about scripting, or maybe they're interested in doing some scripting for security automation. And this is a good way to get started with that. So, maybe you just want to write a script that the analyst can run that goes out and checks the reputation of a URL or an IP address. And that's something that you can do real easy in scripting. That's one of my examples here. VirusTotal even has some information out on their website about how to use their API and some code. So you can go out and you can take a look at that and kind of learn how to do this. And then, later you could add some other things to it to go and maybe check some other sites and do some other reputation type lookups. But this is just an idea of something that you can do to get you started in scripting, and also something for you to think about. Excuse me. As you try to bring that information closer to the analyst, like what can I do? What kind of scripts can I write to bring that information closer to the analyst? And next we have triage and information collection. As you guys know, we can spend a lot of time on triage and just trying to collect different artifacts and different events. And who in here has wasted a couple of days or years of their life on phishing and looking at phishing emails? I know almost everybody. So that's something that automation can help you with. One of the things that I like, I'm kind of assuming that most people have a phishing mailbox, and you tell your users, hey, if you have a phishing email, send it to this mailbox. Or a lot of people have the button in Outlook that you click on and it sends it over. And if you guys are not doing that I know Jeremy talked about it yesterday, but that is a great thing that you can do, where you add the button, and that way they don't have to know who to send it to or anything. They click the button and it goes straight over. So I'm kind of assuming that everybody has that mailbox. And so if you guys want to look at this tool here, it's by Logarithm. It's called the Phishing Intelligence Engine. It's really cool. You're going to put it on like a workstation type machine that's got Outlook on it. And as people send those phishing emails over to your phishing address, what this does is it starts to look at those emails ahead of time. And so when the analyst goes in, they'll have some information collected already, and they'll be able to see even like some screenshots, some IP reputation, URL reputation, etc. They'll already have this information collected where the tool has done it for them, and they don't have to go out and manually do these things. And there's some other products that do this as well, but this one is really good. It's PowerShell, so you can modify it. You can kind of do what you want to do with it, change it up a little bit. But it's a really good tool. And then if you use Logarithm as your SIM, there's some additional integrations and some things you can do there that's cool. And then something else, so we've all had that situation where we get an email that kind of makes it through our phishing filters, and we say, yes, this is bad, and then we start thinking, okay, who else within the organization also got this email? And so I wrote a script, and a lot of people have done this. It's fairly common, where it just goes out into Office 365 and uses the Exchange PowerShell new compliance search commandlet to basically pull that information back out of Exchange. So instead of sending the users an email and praying that they read your email before the email that was sent to them, so they're doing things backwards, instead of doing that, you just pull that out of their inbox. So that's pretty cool, and it's easy to do. There's a lot of information out there about how to do that, and actually you can do it manually. I mean, the commandlets through PowerShell let you do it manually, but why not script it? Why not make it really easy on yourself? And then something else that's cool is, what was it, like a year ago, we started getting all these credential harvesting emails. And those things take a while to triage too, because you've got a link and you just kind of want to know what's on the other side of this link, right? But you got to go to your off-network machine. You've got to go through the steps to figure out, okay, what does this go to, and is it just a page that's going to ask me to log in through Gmail, Office, et cetera, et cetera. So we wrote this little, little script really to just do a remote screenshot so that we could see what was on the other side. And it works really well for credential harvesting. Now, when credential harvesting goes away, then the tool will be a lot less effective, but it is cool, and it just uses this screenshot machine API, so there's not a lot of code that you would have to write to do that. But I do want to show you that real quick. This is what it looks like. If you guys want to give this a try, or maybe you want to get started doing some scripting. So the tool really is just asking, it's saying, okay, give me the URL. And then it's going to submit that to this service. It's a free service, or it's a freemium service called Screenshot Machine. And so I want to show you how simple this is. There's more code there, but 4 lines of code here is really what does the heavy lifting. And so really all you're doing is you're sending the URL that you want a screenshot of over to Screenshot Machine, and then you're just telling it to send you back a temporary file, and then it's just going to open that temporary file. So in this case, the URL was a credential harvesting email, and that's what the screenshot looks like. So it's real easy for an analyst just to copy paste that URL, and then they get this screenshot back and they know instantly that it was a credential harvesting or a phishing email, and they don't have to go and try to track that down. They don't have to run it on an off-network machine or anything like that. So threat hunting is something that we've been working on a little bit, and I know a lot of people think that threat hunting has to be something that's completely manual, that you just have to start off from scratch. But that's not true. There's some things that you can do to go out and look within your network and try to find some indicators, and then maybe it does require some human intelligence, but you can at least pull that in first into your SIEM and take a look at it. So anybody here use Bro? So Bro is just a network programming language. It's free and open source, so I mean, if you got some hardware, I don't see why you wouldn't use it. I mean, there's some really great info there unless you're ingesting that info in some other way. But one of the things that we found to be very useful is Rita, which is a product from Active Countermeasures. And so there's a lot of things that it can do, but the most important thing that it can do is look at CNC traffic, and that's really what the tool is for, is to look for CNC traffic. So your firewall, a lot of people think their firewall is going to show them where C2 traffic has occurred, etc. In most cases, I would say almost all cases, that's not true, because the firewall can't look back far enough, or is not going to look back far enough unless you tell it to actually spot these flows. So with Rita, it's going to take your Bro logs for the last 24 hours, examine it, and look for C2 traffic. Of course, it can do some other things. It can look for anomalous URL strings, anomalous DNS, long connections, other things. But of course, the C2 is what it's known for. So if you just go out and you grab that information, then it's going to kind of look like this, and then you can just pull that into your SIEM and just write some correlation searches or some rules to pull that information out and kind of find what you're looking for. And then you can dig deeper to figure out, is this really C2 traffic or is it something else? Okay, so incident response, another one of those things where you can spend a lot of time trying to chase down things. So one of the things that I thought of is, back in the day it was real easy to go into the firewall and just shun an IP. And it didn't require a lot of extra work, but it seems like the next gen firewalls kind of add complexity to this, and some of the later firewalls. So you're going in, you're opening, you're saving, you're committing, you're doing all this stuff. So it's good to have a script that just uses the firewall's API to add an IP to a block list. And so, we've all kind of been looking through the network or looking through the SIEM, and we find an IP and we're like, yeah, this is doing something, I don't like it, I want to block it. Well, if you've got a script like this, then you can just pop that in there and have it blocked automatically. So that can save a lot of time. And then you can do the same. You can have one that'll remove it from the list as well. So there are a couple of tools that are really good as far as incident response type frameworks. I'll go ahead and put them both up there. It's Conza and PS Recon, both PowerShell. They're really good. Like if you, like let's say somebody did get hit with a phishing email and you're curious, you really don't know without doing like a full forensic investigation, did they run an executable? Well, you can use these tools just to go out and grab the shim cache and bring it back and look and try to determine if that was if that file was executed. A lot of other things you can do with these tools. They're very extensive. PS Recon, I know, can even quarantine a machine, which is pretty cool. So if you want to try it out, just quarantine your coworker's machine. It's awesome. And then as far as incident response management, the Hive is really good. I don't know if you guys have ever used it before. Jeremy talked about it yesterday. It's an awesome tool. And I kind of at first like grouped it in a different category from SOAR tools because I didn't really understand all that it can do, and I was wrong because I'm starting to see that it can do a lot of the stuff that the SOAR tools can do, and even more than a lot of them, and it's open source. It's got like a back end called Cortex that can go out and do a lot of stuff like your threat intel lookups, and there's a lot of plugins and things, and then it can integrate in with the malware information sharing platform as well. So it's really cool, and yeah, these slides are already outdated because Jeremy educated me yesterday on how good it is, and so I'm definitely going to look at it, reevaluate, and probably group it with some of the SOAR tools going forward. But it's funny, they don't really advertise it like that, or at least I haven't seen it advertised like that, so it took me a while to figure that out. And then threat intel aggregation. So does anybody have like threat intel feeds like Anomaly or anything like that? That's good if you have something like that. Typically those are expensive, and I guess the mileage may vary depending on what industry you're in. But I know a lot of people initially were doing their own thing with feeds, and even like with Stix Taxi, and those things can consume a lot of time. So a couple of tools that can help you there. Number one is MindMeld, which is a Palo Alto tool, but it's free and open source, and it's a great tool. It'll work with any firewall. And then if you deal with Stix, there's a product called Stacks from Anomaly that's really good, and they have a free taxi feed called Limo that you can use. So it's good if you're not doing any Stix Taxi stuff and you want to get into it. This is a great way to get started. But back to MindMeld, it really is a great tool. I want to show you real quick what it does. So you guys know that threat intel it can be good, it can be bad, it can be stale, right? So a lot of people use different feeds. Well, what MindMeld can do is it can take these feeds on the left, like all your different, like if you have Alien Vault and IBM and your different feeds, you're going to configure those here on the left, and then it runs those through a processor. And then on the right, there's actually 3 files that it's going to spit out. One file high confidence, the other one medium, and the last one low. Well, the high confidence obviously is the ones that you're really interested in, right? So those are the ones, like if an IP address is on every single list, well, there's pretty good indication that IP is bad. But then as that, let's say that it was a machine that's compromised, it gets cleaned up, well, then it starts falling off of a few of the lists. And as it does, the confidence level goes to medium. So this kind of keeps your threat intel feeds clean and not a lot of garbage in them. And so this is kind of what it looks like. So you're feeding that into either a text document or a file on your web server, and then you feed that to your firewall. And typically your firewall is just going to be a rule that says, hey, if it's in this text file or on the web server, then block that. And then you can actually use it the other way too. So a lot of people struggle with Office 365 and figuring out what IPs and URLs it uses. Well, there's a published list, and so you can take that list and run that through MindMeld and have it give you basically all the IPv4 IPs, IPv6 IPs, and all the URLs associated with Office, and then you could build an allow rule if you wanted that would only allow certain things over to Office 365. So that's kind of cool. And next we have automated attack simulation. These tools have really become popular in the last year or so. And they're both commercial and open source tools. There's some really good ones that are focused on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. That's definitely the ones that I would look at. You may wonder, how does this fit into automation? Well, these tools are awesome in testing your controls. And you can do it in an automated fashion. You can do it, fully or partially automated. But you can test your controls in a way that, like, for your endpoint. You can see if your endpoint is effective, and then also with your SIM and your rules, you can run the automated attacks and then figure out, did that generate an event? And if not, then you can go back and tune your SIM, tune your endpoint, tune whatever protection that you have, and make sure that the next time it's caught. So if you hadn't taken a look at any of those, you can definitely do that. And I've got a slide at the end that's got some information, all the links and everything that I'm going over. And there's quite a few of those that you'll see there. Okay, so the last phase here is the SOAR tools. Again, this is security, orchestration, and automation response. Does anybody use any tools like that, like Phantom or Demisto, or anybody using that? Anybody looking at them? Proof of concept, anything like that? Okay. So these tools, they all typically have a few common features. And number one is Playbooks. And Playbooks are really good because they help you do things the same way, each time that you're doing it. And as you bring Playbooks into your InfoSec environment, you can actually not only have a way of doing things the same way every single time, but you can automate pieces of that, right? So Playbooks are really cool, and that's something great that these tools are bringing to us, is the ability to have these playbooks so that we can do things over and over again the same way every single time, have things documented, and also bring that level of automation. The other thing is the integration with the major technologies and security vendors. So I guess that's one of the difficulties, like what we talked about, the SIM and how you wanted to integrate that. Well, that's kind of a difficult thing, right? I mean, even a lot of the SIM vendors and a lot of the security vendors, their integration, I mean, if you look at the marketing slicks, it looks awesome, but when you try to do it, it's not that easy. Well, these SOAR tools do have a lot of integrations with these different security vendors that are pretty good. So because that's what they do, right? They allow you to talk to different platforms. This really helps in integrating your products. Something else that they do is context enrichment or indicator enrichment, and that's really just because they have the connection to your internal sources, and then they can go out and look those up, in all sorts of different threat intel feeds and that sort of thing, and figure out the context. And then several of them can do alert stacking, where if you get 1,000 alerts, it'll just show you one, and as you drill into it, you can figure out what the overall picture of the event looks like. So here are the players, and when I started looking at this, I really thought there was just a couple, but there's really a lot of players out here in this market. And then one other thing that I've noticed, I'm sure more of these are going to get swallowed up because this has already happened. So Phantom Cyber was purchased by Splunk, FireEye, Invitas, Microsoft purchased Hexadite, IBM, Resilient Systems, and Rapid7 Comad. So I'm sure we're going to see more of this as like some of the SIM vendors try to get into orchestration and automation. We definitely will see more of this. So some common use cases for SOAR. Number one, again, is phishing automation. All the vendors that I've talked to have told me that phishing automation is the number one cause that people are going out and looking at their products. It's no surprise. We spend a lot of time on phishing. Context enrichment is another thing. People just want to be able to add intel to alerts without having an analyst go out and search and build those cases up. And then vulnerability management, like we talked about before, just being able to bring the vulnerability data in and then actually look at it and score it against your environment to figure out, do I really care about this? Do I have machines that fall into this category, and kind of help you determine when machines need to be patched or how critical they are. This is what a playbook looks like. If you guys have never seen a playbook, this is actually from Phantom. So it's probably hard to read this, but so on the far left here, the file is acquired, and then here it's detonated, and then here's a decision tree saying was the file good or bad. And then if the file is bad, you can see that a lot of events are happening. So it's blocking the IP. It's searching the hash across other workstations to see if that hash exists on any other machines. If that hash does exist, then it can block that hash, and it can even go out and quarantine the machine. So, and these playbooks are fully customizable. You can build your own, so you can kind of do, whatever it is that you want to do. So a lot of people have asked, okay, that's cool. How can I get it? Well, luckily there's 3 products that offer community editions that are all really good. Demisto is one of them. Phantom, which is Splunk, is another one. And PsyOps, CyberSponse, is the third one. And they offer community editions. They're all limited in what they can do, typically by the number of automated events that they can process within a day. But you can actually stand these up, and I would encourage you to do so if you've never seen them, just to understand what they do and what value they can bring, and the level of complexity. But this is a good way to get your feet wet and start to understand what these products do. Some of the other things that you might want to know about SOAR is, number one, the cost. Let's say you're a small environment, you've only got a couple of analysts or whatever. You're still looking at $75,000 to $100,000 for any of these products. They're fairly expensive. And then complexity, because there is integration with all these different products, there's definitely some complexity there. And as you upgrade products and make changes within the environment, of course, you're going to affect the way these products work. So there's definitely some complexity that you need to think about. The other thing you want to do is look at your tools and then look at the integrations offered by these vendors and make sure there's alignment. So make sure your vulnerability management platform is covered, your endpoint, whatever. Just make sure those are there in the product. And then the last thing is do a proof of concept. So if you want to try to use SOAR for phishing automation. Let's say you want to go fully automated. Make them set it up for you. Make them prove that it will work in your environment through a proof of concept. And then day one, you're rolling. You're ready to go. Okay, so why would we not automate something? Well, we've all seen probably the result of some bad automation, right? So, a couple of reasons. Number one, automating a bad process is a recipe for disaster. So, if a process doesn't work very good, doesn't work very well, you probably don't want to automate that because you're probably just going to produce the same bad results quicker. So, not a good idea. And then, even automated tasks need documentation. I mean, you can't automate something just because you don't want to document the old physical process. That's not a good idea. Because these automated tasks, they are going to break. Of course, they're going to break when you're on PTO or whoever created it. It's going to be probably out of commission when they do break. So, there's a certain level of training and understanding that needs to take place here. A couple of different people probably need to understand the automation. And not only that, but it's a good idea to maybe document and have a good process for failing back, right? So just because you automate something doesn't mean that you can forget about the old manual process, because what happens when the automation breaks? Well, you might need to go back. So it's a good idea to document that as well. And then the other thing is just remember that automation adds complexity. So it is great, it can save time, etc., but it adds complexity. So you just need to account for that. A couple final thoughts here. It's okay to start small. So if you've got a process that's 10 steps, it's okay to just automate maybe a few of those steps and then update the documentation. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can definitely learn a lot more sometimes when you go that route. The other thing is don't be afraid to seek help from other teams. So if you need help maybe doing some scripting or whatever, a lot of times like your development team or whatever, they may be glad to help you, and that may help increase your bond with those guys. And then I would say it's good to offer assistance to other teams. And in many cases, we can help other teams do some automation, and also as an end result, help that product be more secure. Especially if you think about like the building or automating workstations and server builds and that sort of thing. A lot of times we can help out on that, and the end result is that we are able to make some decisions and maybe influence some other things that we'd like to see from a security perspective. And then lastly, I would just say if you do this and it works and you're able to save money, then just evangelize automation within your organization, because chances are if it helped you, then there's some other teams out there that could also benefit from this as well. So, all right, that's it. If you guys want to get in touch with me, I'm eWaters99 on Twitter. I'll post these slides out there, and I'm also around all day today if you guys want to ask any questions. And then if you want to get a hold of these slides, I do have these links. So, I've got some of the tools, some API information, and that sort of stuff. So you can grab those links and check out any of the tools that we talked about. So I think we might have a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions. Go for it.
When you guys are using like the PowerShell automation, there's scripts to gather data from endpoints. Are you signing those? Like, how do you know? Do you have certain whitelisting things in place so you're not keying off your own PowerShell, things like that, or do you sign your PowerShell, or how are you guys making sure that when you're automating all these things, that you're also not making more noise in your guys' tool?
Right. Yeah. So I would definitely say for the PowerShell to use signing, to sign your own scripts. That's definitely what I would say is a best practice. And again, that's going to add more complexity. But I mean, the last thing that the InfoSec team wants to do is introduce risk. So yeah, I would definitely say that signing the scripts is a good idea. And that's another thing that shows maturity, right? As when we start to recognize those things and make sure that we don't introduce additional risk. So yeah, that's a good idea. Good point. Any others? I see a lot of sleepy faces. All right, thanks guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming.